This is Dick Zondag, the Garden Doctor, and today we're going to talk a little bit about grafted vegetables. Very few people have heard about this, but if you're a very good gardener or you want to show off your tomato production or your pepper production, grafted plants are the way to go. Stay tuned and we'll talk a little bit more. Today we're here in the greenhouse where we're growing the tomato transplants and the grafted tomatoes and peppers and eggplants that we're going to be sending to our customers in the next few weeks so that they can get them planted in their garden. I wanted to talk a little bit about grafted vegetables. Now, grafted vegetables are not new, but they are kind of new to the United States. History goes back as far as 500 AD, where some Chinese farmers had grafted gourd varieties onto a bottle gourd rootstock, and they found that they had a lot more vigor. It produced more gourds, and they could produce a lot of different gourds on one vine. So the methods were refined, and they started in the early 1900s. They started grafting the Solanaceae family, the tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. And the reason that you graft them is, number one, you pick a rootstock that's immune to the diseases in the soils, and this is really important with some of the heirloom varieties like Brandywine and Mortgage Lifter and some of the others. They're very susceptible to the fusarium wilt that's in the soil, and if you repeat where you plant your tomatoes every year, you're going to get the verticillium and fusarium wilts. And so what you do is we have developed, or the industry has developed, rootstocks that are immune to these diseases, and what they do is they graft the varieties that they want to grow onto these rootstocks, and it not only gives them disease protection, but it also gives them a lot of vigor, because the rootstocks that they use have a lot of vigor. The second use of them is in hydroponics. With using grafted rootstocks, you get a much higher production in a smaller area. And if you have a small garden, or your soil is restricted, or if you've been growing tomatoes on the same ground and you have trouble growing the heirlooms, growing them on a hardy rootstock is the way to go. So let's look at a tomato that we have ready to ship. Now, we have two of them here. Now, the way you can tell if a tomato is grafted is there is a area on the stem within probably about an inch from the ground, where you can see that the graft has been taken. Now, very similar to what they do with fruit trees when they graft fruit trees onto a rootstock. And you can see the vestiges here where the clip that was holding the graft together was pushed off, because as the diameter of the stem increases, it'll push that clip off so that it doesn't girdle the vine as it's growing. Now, with tomatoes, you have to grow them and train them, because wherever a tomato vine touches the ground, it roots. And the only way that it can prevent it is by having that rootstock in the ground. Wherever a grafted rootstock plant touches the ground, it will root, and that will be the way that the diseases get in. So when you plant, like this is a Brandywine, when you plant it, you have to make sure that this stays above ground and that you train it so that none of that vine touches the ground. So you can either train it on a pole, you can train it on a fence, but that particular area has to stay above the ground, because if it gets buried deeper than that graft union, it'll root and you've got a regular seedling. So that's a Brandywine. I also brought a big beef grafted tomato, and you can also see on here where the graft union is. And so what you'd be doing is taking the sucker and the first couple of nodes off as they grow, so that you've got that vine above the ground, and then you train it on something where the plant will not touch the ground. Other plants that can be grafted in the Solanaceae, peppers, and you can see that this pepper has not shed the clip yet, but we can pull it back because it has already knit, and here is where the graft union is. You want to plant that so that the graft union is above ground. And again, with peppers, when they get a heavy load of fruit, they'll tend to bend over. So you want to have some mechanism for training them up on. Also, we have some of the eggplants, and you can see here the little clip is being expelled, but here is where the graft union is, and you want to keep the soil below that graft union. Now, if you've got a regular seedling, which this is early girl, there is no graft union there. And with these, if you do have a taller plant, you can put it deeper in the ground, or you can put it horizontally and then just bring the last 2 or 3 leaves out of the ground, and it will root all along here, and it'll have a much bigger root system, so that will work with that. Here's a brandywine seedling, and you can see there's no graft union in there. And the problem with that is that brandywine is a very slow grower, and it only produces a little bit of fruit, and it's susceptible to the soil-borne diseases. And so even though brandywine is an excellent tomato, most people get maybe a half a dozen fruits off a brandywine tomato. They'll feel like they've had success. With the grafted one, remember the graft is here, they'll get a much heavier crop and much earlier crop, and you'll probably get double to 3 times the amount of fruits on it. So same way with the pepper, you can see there is no graft union in that, and production with the grafted peppers will be much heavier. In fact, you've got to stake it up, or the fruit will pull the stem over. If you have any other questions on our grafted vegetables, we're very enthused with the production that we've gotten. We've been selling these plants through our catalog for probably 8 to 10 years now, and people that plant them and grow them right are very encouraged by the amount of fruit that they get. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe by hitting the subscribe button, the bell, so when we do another video you're alerted, and we wish you a very great gardening season. And if you decide to purchase grafted tomatoes, you'll have a great bumper crop.